It started the summer before my junior year of college. I was back home, working a part-time job at the local community center and staying at my mom's place while she traveled for work. Things felt simple, slow, and in a way, safe. My days were spent between helping out at summer camp and catching up with old friends. One of those friends was Ava. Ava and I had been best friends since middle school. We had one of those rare bonds where time and distance couldn't touch the closeness we shared. Even if we hadn't talked in months, the moment we saw each other, it was like no time had passed. She was still bubbly and spontaneous, always dragging me into some sort of last-minute plan. And I was still the quieter one, tagging along because her energy made me feel more alive. Her house was my second home growing up. I knew the smell of their cinnamon-scented candles and the creak of the kitchen floorboards better than I knew my own. Her parents were kind, especially her dad, Mr. Callahan, or David, as he later insisted I call him. David was one of those dads who managed to stay cool without trying too hard. He had a calm, confident presence that made you feel at ease around him. He worked in finance, always had a clean shave, wore soft polo shirts, and drove a perfectly maintained black SUV. When Ava and I were teenagers, he'd let us host movie nights in the basement, even bring us pizza and snacks without hovering. Back then, I saw him as just Ava's dad. I never thought of him as anything else. But that summer, something shifted. It was a hot July evening when Ava invited me over for a small bonfire in their backyard. A few of our old high school friends were there, talking about how weird it was that we were almost seniors in college now. Time was moving fast, and none of us were ready for what came next. As the night wound down, people left one by one. Ava's mom was out of town visiting her sister, and by midnight, it was just Ava, me, and her dad sitting by the dwindling fire. Ava eventually got tired and headed to bed, but I stayed, too awake to sleep. David offered me another drink, just sparkling water, and we sat watching the embers glow. That's when the conversation turned more personal. He asked about school, my major, whether I was seeing anyone. I laughed and told him dating in college was just a mess. He smiled, but it was a different kind of smile. Not condescending. Just knowing. "You know, you've really grown up, Emily," he said, his voice low and warm. "I don't mean to embarrass you, but it's been amazing watching you become the woman you are now." I wasn't used to compliments from men like that, especially not from someone I used to call Mr. Callahan. I brushed it off politely, thanked him, and told him he was sweet for saying that. I didn't want to make things awkward, so I stood up and said I should head home. But as I started gathering my things, he reached out, just lightly, and touched my wrist. "You don't have to leave just yet. It's late. You're safe here." I didn't know what to say. There was something in his eyes, something softer than I expected. I told myself he was just being fatherly, protective. I nodded and sat back down. That night, we talked for almost 2 more hours. About life, about regrets, about feeling stuck even when things looked fine on the outside. I opened up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone in a long time. And at some point, I don't know when exactly, the atmosphere changed. It was subtle, but I felt it. He looked at me differently. And I let him. When I finally decided to leave, he walked me to my car and said quietly, "What we talked about tonight, it stays between us, okay?" I smiled and agreed. It felt like a shared secret, a bond. And at the time, I didn't realize how dangerous that bond would become. The next few weeks were a blur of emotional confusion. I kept going back to their house, sometimes to see Ava, sometimes not. David always found reasons to linger a little longer when I was there. And slowly, carefully, he crossed boundaries I wasn't strong enough to stop. A brush of my arm, a compliment that lingered too long, an offer to drive me home when Ava was out. And then one afternoon it happened. Ava had gone to run errands with her mom. I stayed back to wait for a delivery they were expecting. David was working from home. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone when he walked in and sat beside me. Too close. We didn't speak. He looked at me and I looked back. My heart was beating fast, but I didn't move. I didn't know how to stop what was happening. He leaned in and whispered, "You're beautiful. You always have been." And then he kissed me. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't violent. But it was wrong. After a few seconds, I pulled away, breathless, shaken. I said, "We can't," and stood up. He didn't argue. He just said, "I know. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." But it did. Over the next month, our interactions blurred between secrecy and shame. He told me he felt seen when he was with me, that Ava's mom barely noticed him anymore, that it wasn't just about attraction, it was about connection. And I, foolishly and painfully, believed some of it. I hated myself for it. I started avoiding Ava, making excuses not to come over. But she was my best friend. She started noticing something was wrong. One evening, she asked me straight up, "Emily, did something happen? You've been weird lately. Like, really distant." I almost told her. I wanted to, but I was too afraid. Of losing her. Of breaking everything. I told her I was just stressed about school. Then came the night that changed everything. I was at home when my phone lit up. It was a text from David. "Can you talk?" I didn't respond. I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I needed to walk away for good. But 5 minutes later, he sent another message. I told someone. I had to. My stomach dropped. I called him instantly. "You what?" I told a friend, someone I trust. I just needed to get it off my chest. "But don't worry, they don't know your name." I was speechless. Furious. Terrified. "You promised me. You said it would stay between us." "I know," he said. But it was eating me alive. I didn't say anything specific. I swear. But secrets have a way of unraveling. That friend he spoke to turned out to be someone who knew my cousin. And within days, whispers started. At first, just vague rumors. Then people began connecting dots. By the following week, I started getting questions, awkward, probing questions from people I hadn't spoken to in years. I panicked. I avoided everyone. I stopped answering Ava's texts. I didn't leave the house for 3 days. And then she showed up at my door. When I opened it and saw her standing there, tears in her eyes, I knew she knew. "You were with my dad?" she asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears rolling down my face. She slapped me. Not hard, but enough to sting. "I trusted you. He's my dad." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't." She didn't let me finish. She just turned and walked away. That was the last time we spoke. I transferred schools for my senior year. I couldn't bear the weight of everything I'd lost. Not just my best friend, but a part of myself. The version of me that once believed in clean boundaries, in good intentions, in trust. David tried reaching out once more. Sent me an email saying he still thought about me, that he wished things had gone differently. I never replied. Now, years later, I still carry